In this video, I will show you how you can install LXD using Ansible. I had another video in which I showed you how you can install it manually and also how you can remove it and how you can run virtual machines and containers. Today in this video, I will only show you how you can install it, and in another video next time, I will show you how you can remove it, also using Ansible. Don't worry, I will show you the code as well. This is just the blog post which I made about this topic, and we will follow this blog post and the table of contents. And the first chapter is how much an Ansible role should be capable of. And when I started to learn about Ansible and work with Ansible, I wanted to do everything with Ansible and nothing without it. And now I realized that if I don't need something and I would implement it only because I think that it could be useful for someone if I share the role, then I ask myself, do I really want to share that role? And the answer is usually no. So let's just keep it simple and implement the features only what we need. The next chapter is more interesting, so let's go to install ZFS utils and create a ZFS pool. And maybe you remember how we created the ZFS pool last time when we installed LXD manually, and this is that command which we used. We needed two variables, one for the name of the ZFS pool and one for the list of the disks which we wanted to use in the ZFS pool. And we need to do the same in Ansible, so we will create the new role, ZFS pool, and we will have a new default main YAML, which will contain the default variables or the default values of the variables. ZFS pool, and the defaults folder, and the main YAML. That's it. And the default name of the pool will be default, and obviously I don't want to set the list of disks because I don't know what disks I will use in the future. So now I will have to start to create my tasks. And the first task is the installation of the ZFS Linux utils package. And I can use the package built-in module for that. And I want to install it as root, so I will have to use the become parameter and set the value to be true. And there is a state, it has to be present. It means that I want it to be present. I want to install the package. If I want to remove it, then I have to use the absent value. Now let's see what's the next. And the next will be that I want to create a ZFS pool, but only if that is not there yet. So I have to get some information about the pool, and I can use a zpool facts module. So let's just copy it. And the problem is, if the pool is not there yet, it will fail. This module will fail. So I will have to ignore all the errors and I will handle it later. And the way I can handle it, I have to set the variable here using the register keyword. And then I can use this variable to get the status of the previous task, of this task. And this is the next role. Task, this is a task, not a role. And I can also use variable in the name of the task. This could be useful when I want to see what pool I created, and I can see it in the logs. Okay, then I have to run this task only if the previous task failed, because failing means that the pool doesn't exist yet. Again, I have to run it as root, so I use the become parameter, and then I use the built-in command module to run the zpool create command. And I have to pass that two variables which I talked about before. And there is something I haven't talked about yet, the join filter. We have to use this join filter because the ZFS pool disks variable is a list, and I need a string, which I can use in this command, and the join filter will convert this list to a string, in which the values are separated by spaces. We could finally try it, but we first need to have a playbook. So let's create the playbook. And it has to be playbook LXD install YAML. And we had another playbook before. We called it playbook.yaml, and now it's time to rename it. It was just an example hello world playbook, so let's call it playbook hello YAML. And this way we can tell which playbook does what. So let's go into the playbook LXD install, and we need a name. We can choose any name, for example, install LXD, and we need the list of hosts on which we want to run these tasks. And since we don't have categories yet, we need to use the keyword all. We need to run roles, so we need the roles keyword, and our role is called ZFS pool. And we need some parameters here. The first is the ZFS pool name. It has to be LXD default. And then ZFS pool disks. Could be a list here in the playbook. And obviously I don't want to do that because I have one disk and you will have another one. So let's just introduce a new variable, which we will use in our inventory file. And this variable will be called config. We will use a general prefix, which will tell us that this variable is used in the inventory file. You could also use just the ZFS pool name and the ZFS pool disks variables in the inventory file, but I like to use this method because this way I will know where I defined these variables. All the parameters of a role will be in the playbook, and if I have to customize something or let a user customize something not in the playbook, then I will introduce a variable and set it in the inventory file. So let's call it config LXD ZFS pool disks, and we can define it in the inventory file. And I believe I already have it here. Yes. This is just a simple list. If you have multiple disks, multiple partitions that you want to use, you can add it here. Now we can try to run it. Ansible playbook. We need the inventory file, inventory YAML, and the name of the playbook, which is LXD install. And we will run some tasks as root, so we will need the ask become pass parameter here. And press enter. We got an error message because the role doesn't exist. I created this role in the wrong folder. I have to move it back under roles. Now let's try again. So as you can see, we had a get zpool facts task. It was failing and we ignored it. And in the next task, we created the ZFS pool, LXD default. And that's it. So now we have a ZFS pool and we can check it. Zpool list. I also have another pool here. We only have to work with the LXD default. If you don't have a physical disk or a partition, then you can create a virtual disk. You can use a truncate command and set the size of the disk. I have to use a small size because I don't have much space on this machine. I will use 1 GB and the name will be test ZFS disk img. Let's go back to my inventory file and I will replace my original partition with the new test virtual disk. And before I can run it, I will remove this LXD default. LXD default. Of course, I need sudo. And now I can try to execute my Ansible role playbook again. Let's check the pool, z pool, status, LXD default, and you can see it uses our virtual disk. Now I don't need that, I want to use my original disk, so I will remove it again. Z pool, destroy, LXD default. And now, because I had to remove the pool manually, I will also check the disk, my original disk I mean. So this is the short name. So it still remembers my ZFS pool. So I will wipe it. Okay, now we can go back and restore my original disk. Okay, so we finally have a role and playbook which we can run multiple times, and we will have the same result. And the next role will be the installation of LXD. So let's scroll down in the blog post, and we need a configuration file which we can use in our Ansible role. And I use a configuration file which I created when I was talking about how we can run virtual machines using LXD. And when I installed LXD, I also saved the initial configuration file, LXD init YAML, and this is what I will use now. So let's save this in our Ansible role. And the new role is LXD install. We will have a new folder called files and LXD init YAML. This is just a static file without any template, and later we can also customize this and, for example, use a variable to set the name of the ZFS pool. For now, we will leave it this way, and we'll create our Ansible tasks in the role tasks main YAML. And we will need to install a snap package, so we will use a module for that. First, I will set a name, install LXD package or snap package. I have to do it as root again, and the module will be community general snap. The name of the package is LXD, and the state, of course, is present. And we also need the channel variable, which will be used for the version of the LXD package, and I could just use the stable LTS version like this. But I don't want to use it this way, I want to use variables, so I will remove it from here and create the new file in the defaults folder called main YAML. So let's copy the variables from the blog post. And the first is the channel. And of course, the stable version will be the default value, but we can override it if we want to. And the second option, the second parameter, is that we can disable or enable initializing the LXD configuration. And then we can set where we want to save the file, the initial configuration file. Okay, so I will have one variable for the base folder, one for the file name, and the third variable will use both of the previous variables. So let's just copy the variable name for the channel. And that's it. Now, we could try this, but we have to change the playbook. We will use the new role called LXD install. We don't have to use parameters here for now because the default value will be okay. Now, let's go back to the terminal and try to run this now. So we have the LXD package, we can check it. But this is not initialized yet, so I will have to go back and also go back to the task. And we have to initialize the configuration. And now I want to upload my init configuration file, but before I can do that, I will have to create the folder to which I want to upload it. And after I uploaded my configuration file, I will need another task which can initialize the config. So now I could just use all of my tasks here without any special syntax, or I can use a block. And if I use a block, I can set the condition in the block and not in the tasks. Now we can finally create the folder. We will use the file module and we will have to use the state directory. In this case, it is not present or absent, it is directory. Now we can also copy the file. And the source can be just the name of the configuration file, and Ansible will look for it in the files folder. And as you can see, I will protect this configuration file, so only the owner can access it, and the owner will be the root user. Of course, there is nothing secret in this configuration file yet, but there is no harm in protecting this configuration file. And now we can initialize it. And for the apply LXD config task, I had to use the built-in shell command because this is what supports this special syntax, which will help me to redirect the file to the standard input of the LXD init command. Let's run it. And now let's check the remote machine. We can try to run LXC command like LXC list. And it looks like it was initialized, because when it is not initialized, then we see some warnings here. We are almost done, but there is one more problem. And for that, I will have to run the playbook again. And Ansible shows me that the apply LXD config task ran again. Since I don't want Ansible to initialize my LXD configuration every time when I run this playbook, I want to add one more condition. I will add the register keyword to the copy task. And let's also copy the name of this variable. And I also have to add the condition to the next task and check if the previous task changed. And now if I go back to my terminal and I try to run this playbook again, I will not see any change. It says it was skipped, so we are finally done. We have a playbook and 2 roles to install LXD. The next time we will create 2 more roles to remove LXD, and I have to tell you that creating those roles will be even more difficult than creating these roles. So if you don't understand what we were doing in this video, please leave a comment under the video and I will help you.